DFS. It is Friday, November 19th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 11 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. And this podcast is sponsored by our partners at FanShare Sports. FanShare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Jared, there are definitely some players across positions that I'm going to be interested in seeing the ownership rates, the ownership projections on this week. It starts, of course, I think with Chiefs Cowboys, but there are plenty of guys across positions that'll just, I'll be curious to see what's actually chalk and what's not this week.
Yeah, I don't think many players are going to be super chalk this week. I think there's just a lot of good places to look. The Chiefs Cowboys game is going to be most popular, but a lot of those guys are expensive, so it's kind of tough to really load up on that game. I am going to that Chiefs Cowboys game for my cash quarterback, though. I do think there are some viable cheap quarterback plays this week. I tried to go that route last week with Carson Wentz. It absolutely destroyed me. So I'm not going to mess around this week. I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes, $7,600. That's actually his lowest main slate DraftKings price of the season. Obviously had the big bounce back game last week. He has 5 games this season of 28 plus DraftKings points. So, people want to act like it's been a down season for Mahomes, but he's still been awesome for fantasy for the most part. The Chiefs have the highest implied total of the week at 29.25 points. The Cowboys, too, there's been all this talk about Mahomes struggling against the too high coverages, and Vegas did not play much of that on Sunday night, which is probably part of the reason Mahomes bounced back. Dallas is 25th in percentage of too high coverage this season, so it's another good spot like it was last week for Mahomes. I think he's going to have another big game.
Yeah, Dallas not especially strong at safety, and the corners have come back to earth after a big start to the season in the interception category. I'm of course going to go cheaper because I can't bring myself to pay the expensive price for a cash quarterback. And I'm going to look back to Tua Tagovailoa at $5,500. I wanted him to be my cash QB a couple weeks ago. That was when he had a finger injury, and we didn't yet know that it was fractured. And we found out Sunday it was fractured, and all of a sudden it was Jacoby Brissett time again. He, of course, came back last week on Thursday night against Baltimore after Brissett got hurt and played well. I mean, I guess the finger was good enough to play and they were just being overly cautious. Before that, of course, the last 2 healthy games that we saw from Tua, 290 plus yards and 6 total touchdown passes in that span. So I think in a good matchup with the Jets, I don't feel worried about going down to that level. I'm not concerned about him doing the same thing that Carson Wentz did to me last week as well. Because he's been playing better lately than Carson Wentz has, basically.
Yeah, and Tua put in full practices on Thursday and Friday and is not on the final injury report at all. So I'm not super concerned about that finger injury anymore. I do think he is the best cheap quarterback play for cash. I did think it was going to be Cam Newton, but then Matt Rule comes out today and says, Newton's going to start, but PJ Walker is probably going to play too. So I don't think you can play Newton in cash if, he's not going to be out there for 100% of the snaps.
Why in the world would you plan to rotate quarterbacks if one of them is at least far enough along to start? What do you gain by getting PJ Walker in for some plays?
Right. I mean, Cam's been there for a week and it's a brand new offense, so maybe he's just not ready. But at that point, just start PJ Walker one more game and then go to Cam next week. I don't know.
Exactly. If that's the case, have a Cam package that you put in the game. But if he's opening the game, it doesn't make any sense to me, especially because you're going to somebody who barely has any NFL experience anyway. So whatever. I guess it's kind of annoying, but I at least didn't want to play Cam Newton anyway, so it makes it easier for me to not do that. GPP side, what do you like at QB?
Yeah, I do still think Cam's in play for tournaments at that price tag. He could play 80% of the snaps and score 2 rushing touchdowns, and he pays off at that price tag. But there are a lot of good quarterback options this week to me. So this is a week where I've been trying to focus on 2 to 3 stacks in my 4 to 6 tournament lineups. This week I might go 6 different stacks in my tournament lineup. So I like both sides of the Chiefs Cowboys game. I want to get pieces of that. The Cowboys side now with Amari Cooper out, that hurts Dak a bit, but to me it makes him easier to stack with really CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Dalton Schultz as your stacking options now with Dak Prescott. So I'm still gonna be playing Dak. I'm gonna play both sides of the Bengals Raiders game as well, both Joe Burrow and Derek Carr. 2 pass heavy offenses. That game has the second highest over under of the week behind Chiefs Cowboys. So I think that's kind of the sneaky game. It's possible Bengals Raiders ends up higher scoring than Chiefs Cowboys. And then Tua. I have Tua down for tournament here. Love the matchup against the Jets. As you mentioned, he's had those two big games. He's had two, 25 plus point DraftKings games. So he has shown tournament winning upside this season.
Yeah, you think you kind of have to go up to the expensive quarterbacks to get that tournament winning ceiling, but I think we can get it in some cheaper options this week, and it'll help you fit in some of the other pieces from those, more expensive lineups. I have Tua in play here as well. Jalen Waddle is third in dollars per point among wide receivers in our projections. And I like the cost, most of all on Tua and Jalen Waddle versus everybody else. I really like the Joe Burrow stack too, $6,600. He's got T Higgins at $5,400 available, Jamar Chase at $7,200. It's not too expensive. And then CJ Uzama at $3,500 in a Joe Burrow lineup. The Raiders are the fifth best scoring matchup for tight ends by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. Jonathan Abram, their safety, is coming off a terrible game, his worst coverage grade of the season. Gave up a lot to Travis Kelce in that game, gave up a 30-yard touchdown catch to Evan Engram the game before. Also gave up the long touchdown to Darrell Williams that we saw last week. So he's in a bad place. It's a good matchup there. And then there's also Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller available as potential run backs. Not sure that I'll get to either of those guys. Renfrow is at least more attractive for DK than he is for FanDuel because he's coming off 3 straight 7-catch games.
Yeah, I'm gonna stack Carr with Waller and Renfrow, and I think Waller would be my run back on the Burrow team. I just think Waller has the higher ceiling at his position versus Renfrow, I think.
And I'm gonna guess that Joe Mixon draws higher ownership than Joe Burrow. Maybe it's close between him and Jamar Chase, but I would guess that Mixon's easily the highest owned Bengal this week.
I think it'll be T Higgins actually at that price.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I do think Burrow and Chase will both be lower owned because they're both actually, I think, a bit overpriced. Which again, I don't care about too much in tournaments. I'm just looking for that, ceiling, that quarterback 1 week, and I do think Burrow has that in his range of outcomes this week.
Mm-hmm. Running back for cash, is it impossible to get away from AJ Dillon as a starting point at $6,000?
Yeah, $6,200. Yeah, I think he's a good bet for 15 plus carries. Could get up around 20. We'll see about the passing game role. He's already averaging close to 2 targets per game this season, though, alongside Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones leaves behind 4.7 targets per game. And Dillon has been efficient in the passing game this season. He's caught 89% of his targets, averaged 12.3 yards per catch. So he can catch the football. So yeah, I'm definitely playing Dillon in cash. I'm not gonna not play Christian McCaffrey in cash at this point. I mean, the role he's back into, just $8,900. I mean, McCaffrey was up in the 10,000s at points last season. So I still think he's underpriced here. And I like James Conner as a third cash game play at $6,100. If Kyler Murray is in for Arizona, I'd say, because we saw kind of the downside for Conner and the entire offense if they have to go back to Colt McCoy. But Conner's usage was kind of exactly what we wanted without Chase Edmonds. Last week, 82% of the Cardinals snaps, 10 of the 16 running back carries, 4 targets. So if Kyler's back and the offense is back to what it was, earlier this season, I think Conner is a running back 1 that you're getting at, $6,100.
Yeah, there's so much at running back that we haven't even mentioned Jeff Wilson Jr. or Mark Ingram, and I think that's because they might even be more of GPP than cash plays here. I mean, they're stepping in for high touch volume guys and should get those jobs to themselves pretty much this week in, matchups that aren't scary, especially Jeff Wilson against Jacksonville. But, it's like you don't even need to get to them because there's all this available in cash. Myles Gaskin's one more that I definitely want to throw into the mix, though. $5,700 gets the Jets this week. Like I said, with Tua, I'm probably not playing Tua and a wideout and Gaskin in the same cash lineup. I could play Tua and Gaskin, though, and skip a wideout because Gaskin, of course, catches plenty of balls. And most importantly, his matchup with the Jets finds a defense that's allowing 6 more PPR points per game to running backs than any other team in the league. If you go another 6 points per game down from the number 2 team, you get all the way to the number 10 defense. So a big gap between 1 and 2. And like I said, you can either stack them or use them separately if you're not using Tua for cash. If you're wanting to play a higher price quarterback, Myles Gaskin at $5,700 even gives you savings versus AJ Dillon and James Conner.
Yeah, I like that call. Tournament side for me, I think there are 2 expensive pivots kind of off Christian McCaffrey, who I do think is going to be expensive. Nick Chubb, $700-800. I would not play him in cash coming off the COVID list. I think there's a possibility he's, somewhat limited, and they mix in Dearness Johnson more than they would if, Chubb wasn't coming off COVID. But I mean, the Lions matchup, 29th in Football Outsiders run defense, 30th in adjusted points allowed to running backs. Cleveland has a 27.5 point implied total. That's like fourth highest among main slate offenses. They're facing Tim Boyle at quarterback. Like, they're going to be playing with a lead. They're going to be able to run it a ton. If you give me 20 carries from Chubb against this defense, I think he could definitely lead the slate in points this week.
Tim Boyle is a local anchor, man. He's not an NFL quarterback. It'll be interesting to see how this game goes. I think a couple other expensive guys, Dalvin Cook, 8,200, Ezekiel Elliott, 7,700. Those are the kind of players that I'm curious to see just how high the ownership projections go, because there is so much available in various price ranges. Zeke is in that centerpiece matchup that looked like it was going to kind of control things on the DFS slate early in the week. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as high ownership levels for everybody as it seemed like early on, but it'll still be up there. And really, I'm just mining that whole group of players that we already talked about when I'm making GPP lineups, maybe a little bit less McCaffrey here, because I think he'll be highly owned. And there's at least some risk with that dual quarterback system that things just don't go well. And at the very least, that the touch count goes disappointingly for McCaffrey here.
Yeah, I like the Zeke call. He was kind of the other pivot off McCaffrey. I do think the passing game of the Cowboys is going to be more popular than Zeke, so kind of get some leverage there. Don't forget about Darrell Williams either. We'll see about Clyde Edwards-Helaire tomorrow. Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern, they'll need to activate him if he's going to play. But if he's out, Darrell Williams just $5,400 still. He's been getting running back one level usage. So he's a good pivot off of Mahomes in the Chiefs passing game.
So much a running back. The difficult thing this week is to decide who to use, not, like who to leave out, I guess, as opposed to who really fits in your lineup. Wide receiver for cash, what do you like?
Yeah, you mentioned Jalen Waddle. I'm playing him in cash at $5,600. Over the last 5 weeks, he is third among wide receivers in targets. He's seventh in air yards. He's eighth in PPR points. Devontae Parker, Will Fuller still out on Sunday, so Waddle's going to see good volume against the Jets, who are dead last in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA. So I like Waddle, and then right below Waddle, T. Higgins, who we mentioned too at $5,400. Kind of started to get going into the bye. He had 13 plus DK points in each of his last 3 games. Kind of been on a touchdown drought. He hasn't scored since week 2, but the volume has been there. 8.4 targets since returning from injury. Pretty good matchup here too against Vegas. They're 22nd in Football Outsiders pass D.
Yeah, I like both of those guys, and it's easy to like the fact that T. Higgins is $1,800 cheaper than Jamar Chase here. For helping to fit some of those more expensive players, if you need some salary savings, I think Cedric Wilson at $3,200 is cash playable with Amari Cooper out of that game. He's seen 15 targets over the last 3 games that Michael Gallup did not play. Of course, Gallup returned last week. Actually, has Gallup been back for 2 games now, or was that just his first game last week?
Last week was his first game back.
Okay. That's what I thought. And I was starting to doubt myself as I was talking about it. So yeah, just before that, Cedric Wilson had 15 targets over 3 games. And that's not a great number for a higher priced wideout, but we'll take that for a $3,200 wideout in a high upside offense. And then I think Rashad Bateman is also worth consideration at $4,500. If you don't need quite as much salary savings, but you're looking for somebody that's a decent bet for targets, I think he beats Michael Gallup on floor if you're looking at Michael Gallup as a cash option at quarterback, or at wide receiver.
Yeah, I have Bateman here too. I think he's in play for cash. I like him in tournaments. So he has 8 targets in 2 straight games now. Marquis Brown is listed as questionable for Sunday. He only practiced on Friday. I think he's going to play. But then you have Miles Boykin was ruled out. He's been mixing in for a few snaps. And Devon Duvernay is now listed as questionable. He was added to the injury report on Friday. Duvernay actually played the second most snaps among Ravens wide receivers last week. So like if Duvernay is out, that should mean more playing time for Rashad Bateman, even, if Marquise Brown is in. So I liked Bateman even before all those wide receiver injuries for the Ravens.
Yeah, even with Brown around, even with Duvernay around, Rashad Bateman has seen at least 18.5% target share every single one of his games so far. GPP side, I got to think that Michael Gallup is going to draw high ownership now with Amari Cooper out. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he'll be one of the more popular wide receivers. I think you can still play him. Again, you don't need to fade guys just because they're chalky. Just get some lower owned guys in every lineup, and you're fine.
Yeah, I think Michael Gallup for me though is the kind of guy to fade when the ownership is high because he's definitely no lock for a good target count. He's basically Mike Williams but with even more target competition around him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough to see him really disappointing volume wise on Sunday, with Amari Cooper out. Unless Dallas is playing with a lead and they're able to run the ball and Dak only throws it 30 times, then I could see it. I don't know. It's just such a good price. $4,200. He lets you get so much else in there. I mean, he's obviously not a must play in tournaments, but I'm going to be mixing him in for sure. I'm going to mix in some Tyler Lockett too. $6,000 just seems super cheap for a guy with his type of ceiling. Lockett opened the season at $6,700. He got all the way up to $7,400 on DraftKings. So he's cheap this week. Russell Wilson's the risk. We talked about him on yesterday's pod, just how bad he was in that first game back. He put in a full week of practice this week. He's not listed on the final injury report. I don't know exactly what that means, but theoretically he should be healthier now than he was last week. And then Lockett last year, you remember the 200-yard 3-touchdown game that came against the Cardinals, and he caught 9 balls for 67 yards and a score in the other game against Arizona. And Arizona has shut down DK Metcalf all 4 of their meetings. Since Metcalf entered the league, it's been Lockett who's been better against this defense. So I'm going to take a shot on him at that price tag.
Yeah, it was Patrick Peterson in primary coverage on DK Metcalf. He's gone, but it's not like Patrick Peterson was a shutdown corner right before he left. Otherwise, he'd still be in Arizona instead of leaving for Minnesota after last season. So yeah, I can't fight against using Tyler Lockett here. I'm not sure I can get to it after how bad things went last week, especially because I have Tyler Lockett and season-long stuff for if he does rebound this week. But I'm not going to try to talk anybody off of Tyler Lockett usage.
Good.
It's also worth noting that Budda Baker is questionable for this game. The Cardinals expect him to play, but he's got a heel injury that's bad enough that it significantly limited his practice time this week. So probably going to be at less than 100% for the game. Also looking down in the cheap range, because there are lots of higher priced wideouts to choose from, including guys we mentioned on the cash side. But down in the cheap range, I think Marcus Johnson is also interesting at $3,500, similar to the price for Cedric Wilson that I mentioned. Jared, you mentioned on the Thursday pod that he has looked like the Julio Jones replacement in the Tennessee lineup, playing on that outside spot opposite AJ Brown as the 2 primary edge guys. Over 60% playing time for Johnson 3 times this year, including last week. And each of those games has seen him get at least 5 targets. So he's going to be involved most likely. It's an easy matchup for whatever they decide to do. I guess I say that. It seemed like an easy matchup for Josh Allen and Carson Wentz the past 2 weeks too. So maybe I should give the Jaguars a little more credit, but it's still an upside spot.
Yeah, but Byron Pringle's my cheap guy down there. He was second among Chiefs wide receivers and pass routes last week. Saw 5 targets in that game. So if that stays this week, $3,400 for the Chiefs number 2 wide receiver, I think he's worth a shot in tournaments. And
of course, I misspoke. I said that the Titans are playing the Jaguars, but they're playing the Texans this week. So I don't have to give them any credit because they didn't just shut down Josh Allen.
It's a different crappy pass defense.
Exactly. I do think Marcus Johnson is also in play in that $3K range if you're looking for a cheap wideout who has a good target outlook. AJ Brown is another player that I'm curious to see the expected roster rate for come Sunday morning, because if he's anywhere in single-digit territory, I think he becomes a focal point for building these tournament lineups. Houston's a neutral scoring matchup for wide receivers. And I mean, AJ Brown's AJ Brown. He had a bad week last week against Marshawn Lattimore, which we're probably not giving Marshawn Lattimore enough credit right now for the way that he's been playing in recent weeks.
Yeah, well, the Titans messed up there by taking AJ Brown out of the slot when, that was the best spot to use him with the Saints missing their slot guy. But anyways, yeah, I think AJ Brown's going to be super low coming off the goose egg, or not the goose egg, caught 1 ball. But you have CeeDee Lamb right beneath him in price. And then people are going to go up to Davonte Adams and Tyreek Hill if they really want to spend up. So I think you're going to get Adams super low owned. I like that call.
Tight end for cash. What are you playing?
I mean, Dan Arnold doesn't play again. I don't know if we need to talk about him anymore. I mean, we've talked about him the past few weeks. I think $4,100. Cole Kmet though actually pops as our top points per dollar value at tight end. Already averaging 6.3 targets per game over the last 4 games now. Allen Robinson is not going to play on Sunday, so it's Kmet and Darnell Mooney, and then not much else in the passing game. So I think Kmet is a really good volume bet for the price tag, and the matchup's good here too. Baltimore's weakest spot on defense is tight end coverage. Football Outsiders has them 16th in tight end coverage, and they're 27th in adjusted points allowed to tight ends.
Yeah, and Cole Kmet has seen pretty good target counts lately, 5, 6, 6, and 8 over the past 4 games. I mean, he's basically Dan Arnold this week for $700 less, especially when you factor in Allen Robinson almost definitely being out. And Cole Kmet had a 6 for 87 receiving line his last time out on 8 targets against Pittsburgh. So you don't have to project too much. Like you mentioned, the matchup's great. So I like Cole Kmet right now more than I reasonably should this week.
Agreed.
GPP, what do you like?
And my tournament tight end pool is way too big, so I got to work on whittling it down. But I like Mike Gesicki, definitely on your Tua teams. Coming off the goose egg, Gesicki, I think that's going to keep his ownership down. Good matchup against the Jets, obviously. I really like Dalton Schultz, another guy coming off a disappointing game. Hopefully the Amari Cooper situation doesn't get more people on Schultz, but he still ran her out on 80% of the dropbacks last week. And Cooper's going to free up some targets. I think Schultz is going to take some of those. And then Dawson Knox, another guy coming off a disappointing game last week, just 1 target in his return, but he ran her out on 74% of the pass plays. That's a fine number. And the Colts are dead last in adjusted fantasy points to tight ends. I think it's going to be a pass heavy game plan from Buffalo against a Colts defense. It's just much better against the run than the pass. And, with Cole Beasley still dealing with his rib injury, that really should push more action towards Knox on Sunday.
Yeah, and the Colts are the worst team in the league by our adjusted fantasy points allowed in stopping tight ends from scoring fantasy points. So yeah, it's a great spot for Dawson Knox. He's somebody that I have down. And last week, his snap share was his 2nd largest of the year. So the 1 target is a little bit deceiving there. I also think that CJ Uzomah is a price pivot from Cole Kmet in that range. And obviously a potential factor if you're starting Joe Burrow at quarterback. I think the situation is good enough that you can consider Uzomah for that price, even in a non-Joe Burrow lineup. Jonathan Abram, I mentioned already, allowed 4 for 72 to Travis Kelce last week. The Raiders overall have allowed the 5th most adjusted fantasy points to the position. So it's just a good spot. And Uzomah has been involved enough that, if we get him a couple extra targets here, it could be a really big game. But even if we just get 3 catches and some yardage, chance at a touchdown, that's really all we need from $3,500 tight end.
Yep, I like it.
Defense, Browns get Tim Boyle. They're $3,100 here on DraftKings. I mean, it might end up being the chalkiest defense of all time, don't you think?
I almost think it's not right. Did you see these Tim Boyle numbers in college? I looked them up today.
I saw that you listed them.
They don't even seem real. He had 12 touchdowns in 4 seasons and 26 interceptions. So yeah, it'd be scary to, at least in tournament or at least in cash, to not play the Browns because they're going to be super high owned. But I just kind of want to match everyone else in case they put up 20. I'm not going to get buried. Tournaments, there's always a case to fade a high owned defense. I do like the Panthers at $2,700. I just think they've been underpriced all season on DraftKings for just how good of a defense they are. They're at home against Washington on Sunday. The football team has the 5th lowest implied total on the main slate, so I like them. And I do think the Ravens too. $200 more than the Browns. No one's going to be on the Ravens because they're more expensive than Cleveland. But they do get Justin Fields, who has been better lately, but has struggled against the blitz. I think the Ravens are going to blitz the crap out of them on Sunday. There's going to be some sack and turnover upside for Baltimore.
I think I'm keeping it focused on the Browns or the Panthers at 2,700. I've got those 2 down as well. I don't know. It's a little scary to not play the Browns when they're that close to the cheaper defenses in this matchup. Yeah, maybe Tim Boyle surprises. I can't say that I've looked back a whole lot on his time in Eastern Kentucky to see exactly what we're dealing with, but the Lions like him more than David Blau apparently. So that says something for him, I guess.
He was even bad in the preseason this year. I looked up the PFF passing grades. He was near the bottom in their passing grades in the preseason this year. So, but man, I mean, if they're going to be like 30-40% owned in tournaments, I think they're a good fade because, I mean, they could have a good real life game if they don't score a touchdown and the Panthers do. Like the Panthers are probably going to outscore them.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly get the logic. Any defense that scores a touchdown, and if any of them get 2, then, that is the one to own. It's just like, I don't know. We haven't seen many matchups like this. The Lions were already one of the best scoring matchups with their starting quarterback in. And now we get the guy who's not good enough to be talked about when Jared Goff is healthy.
Yeah. The Lions implied totals down to 15 points. It opened at 18.5.
It's probably still high. I mean, they scored 16 last week in 5 quarters.
Yep.
All right, that's going to do it for this Week 11 DraftKings podcast. Head over to draftsharks.com now. Get more player recommendations. If you're a DS insider, you can check out Jared's cash game picks as well as top GPP options from Corey Bushland. You can also mess around with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and fan share ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free Draft Sharks Discord. You can find the link to do that in the description for this podcast. If you're with us right now on the stream, stick around. We're going to take a brief break and then fire up the FanDuel show. For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us. It is Friday, November 19th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 11 FanDuel podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smola, and this podcast is sponsored by our partners at Fanshare Sports. Fanshare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on draftsharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Jared, QB looks different for me for sure. I'm not looking to go as cheap as on DK this week. What do you like for cash quarterback on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think I've paid up on FanDuel every single week this season. I think just the way they price quarterbacks and their pricing in general makes that the move. I'm going to trust our projections and go with our top value in Lamar Jackson, $8,400. Obviously coming off a rough game against Miami. I think that the entire offense will bounce back. Chicago's been a middling pass defense this season. They're 19th in Football Outsiders DVOA. They're 21st in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. They just lost Khalil Mack for the season. Their best defensive player, their best pass rusher. Akeem Hicks is out for this game. An interior run defender. That's going to help Lamar Jackson. Obviously, that does a bunch with his legs. So I think he's the best value at quarterback this week.
Yeah, safety Eddie Jackson's also questionable for this game. So it's a beat-up Chicago defense. The Bears are the 12th highest in adjusted fantasy points allowed. So it's basically a neutral matchup, but also it leans toward the positive side as far as a matchup. I'm not sure that I'm going to go to Lamar Jackson in GPPs. I'm not saying fade him completely, but he wouldn't be a focal point for me, I think, with the Marquis Brown thigh injury that has him questionable. Lamar Jackson's coming off an illness that kept him out of practice for a couple days. So, a chance that affects him. So I'm just not sure we quite have as high a ceiling as usual.
Yeah, Ravens Bears just doesn't scream, high scoring ceiling game for Lamar. So I do think he's more of a floor play this week.
Yeah. GPP side, I'm going to start with Joe Burrow at $7,400 against the Raiders. Down game against Cleveland last time out, but that broke a string of 3 straight 3-touchdown games for him. Since T. Higgins returned from the shoulder injury in week 5, the Raiders and Bengals are 8th and 9th in situation neutral pass rate. So we could get plenty of scoring in this one. And that's what Vegas says. It's the second highest over under the week at 50.5. So I really like the Bengals side. I like the Raiders side to some degree, but there's just so much more explosive potential among the Bengals passing game.
Yeah, I love Burrow this week. Vegas plays a lot of cover 3 defense. We saw that against Mahomes last week. Joe Burrow averaging 9.3 yards per pass attempt against cover 3 this season. And T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have both been good against that coverage. So that'd be my stack. I would double stack Burrow with both Chase and Higgins. So I like that call a lot. I like Tua Tagovailoa here. We talked about him on DraftKings. I like him on FanDuel. $7,000. Full practices on Thursday and Friday and not on the final injury report. So that finger that he fractured and kept him out 2 weeks ago and for the first half last week shouldn't be a concern anymore. Gets the Jets matchup, dead last in Football Outsiders pass defense DVOA. I like Tua too because it's a concentrated offense with Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki. So that'd be my stack with Tua. I would double stack him with both those guys.
I also like Josh Allen at $8,800. It's not difficult to like Josh Allen, but Buffalo's 5th in situation neutral play pace. So we know that they're going to move the ball. They already love to throw it. They are the league's pass heaviest team by a wide margin. And now they get a pass funneling matchup. The Colts are number 2 in run defense DVOA, well outside the top 20 in pass defense DVOA. So that's the wrong way to approach this Buffalo offense. We're probably not going to get sneaky ownership on these guys, but you can gain some there by not only stacking Stephon Diggs, who I'll do at $8,100, but also Dawson Knox at $5,600. He is still tied for third among Bills in end zone targets for the season, despite missing those 2 games with his hand fracture. And I just don't think there's any way that Dawson Knox is going to get above, a few percentage points in rostered rate.
Agreed. Yeah, my one concern with the Bills offense this week is they're going to be missing Spencer Brown, their right tackle, who's on the COVID list. He was the lineman missing in the game against the Dolphins and the Jags, the 2 games where the Bills offense kind of struggled. So that'll be something worth watching. If Allen ends up struggling again, I think we can probably point to, and that'll be the reason why.
Yeah, Colts are not strong right now in the edge rushing category, but it's certainly always a potential challenge.
Yep.
You got anybody else for GPP quarterback?
No, just Patrick Mahomes. Dak Prescott's tough to get to on FanDuel at $8,400. I don't think I'll be playing him in tournaments, but I do like the Mahomes side, and definitely run it back with a Cowboy on your Mahomes team.
Running back for cash, Jeff Wilson Jr., $5,000 here. Is he the starting point instead of AJ Dillon, since he's $2,000 cheaper, $2,200 cheaper than James Conner?
Well, I think you play both those guys. Wilson and Dillon are my 2 cash locks here. But Wilson is a better play on FanDuel here than he is on DraftKings. He's cheaper for one, despite the salary cap being higher on FanDuel. He's also just a better fit here. I don't think Wilson's going to do a ton in the passing game, but he should dominate carries. Elijah Mitchell, doubtful after finger surgery this week. Jermichael Hasty is out. The Niners obviously do not trust Trey Sermon. Maybe he mixes in for a few carries on Sunday, but I think, Wilson should get at least 15 carries and really, could get 20 plus if this game goes according to script, with the Niners playing with the lead against the Jags.
They should just make Trey Sermon walk around in a Joe Williams jersey. It seems appropriate at this point.
Wilson never got on the field even, did he?
Yeah, I don't know. But I guess they should make him sit out with a Joe Williams jersey out in the parking lot and sell Joe Williams jerseys. I think James Conner is also in play. He's $200 more expensive than AJ Dillon. And I mean, it seems expensive when you compare him to like Jeff Wilson, but that's not an expensive level, $7,000, $7,200 for guys who will dominate the work in their backfields. James Conner will get a Seahawks defense that's second in our adjusted fantasy points allowed. It matters somewhat whether Kyler Murray's in there. I think that the defense they're facing this week in Seattle is softer than Carolina's last week.
Yeah, I like Conner a lot. I have him down as a tournament play here, but I do think he's in play for cash on FanDuel.
I think Myles Gaskin at 6,200 is also in play for cash. Mentioned on the DraftKings show that the Jets are way ahead of everybody else in allowing PPR points to running backs. They're even further ahead in allowing half PPR points to running backs because they're allowing so many touchdowns to the position, allowing 6.3 more half PPR points per game to running backs than any other team. That's the gap between number 2 and number 13 in those standings. So a tremendous matchup and a game that should find Gaskin getting plenty of touches.
Yeah, I think, people don't think of Gaskin as a FanDuel play, but I think, at that price tag in this matchup, he definitely makes sense.
What about GPP running back?
Yeah, so James Conner, I like in GPPs. I like him in cash as well. Zeke Elliott, $8,500. He's just a pivot off the Cowboys passing game. Maybe Dallas ends up leaning on the run a bit more now with Amari Cooper out. It's a good matchup on the ground and in the passing game for Dallas. Kansas City 26th in Football Outsiders run defense, DVOA. So you play Zeke, you're just kind of hoping that he gets the touchdowns and steals them from the Cowboys passing game.
Yeah, it's a solid hope to have, I think. Nick Chubb's a little expensive here at $9,000, but I mean, he's probably going to come in fairly low owned for what his ceiling is when you have Dalvin Cook at 8,400, Zeke at 8,500. I mean, Nick Chubb, I don't know what to expect for the number of carries that he's going to have, but Nick Chubb with, 17 carries against the Lions, there's huge game potential in that.
Yeah. I mean, 200 rushing yards would not shock me Sunday, just how good Chubb is in this matchup.
I'm curious to see Jonathan Taylor's ownership projection heading into Sunday, because the Bills are a tough matchup all around. So I think that people are going to move away from him more than they would normally a guy who's playing as well as he is right now. But the Bills matchup gets a little softer with Star Lotulelei still on the COVID list. I mean, that's certainly a big person, literally and figuratively, missing in the middle of their run defense. He carried 21 times and saw 4 targets in the playoff loss at Buffalo in January.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, the Bills haven't given up many fantasy points to running backs, but teams haven't been trying to run against them. They faced the second fewest running back rushing attempts behind only the Bucs. And the one elite running back the Bills did face this season was Derrick Henry. And, they did a pretty nice job against him, but he had the one long run. He ended up with a good fantasy day because of that. You can kind of see the same thing with Taylor this week.
Mm-hmm. Any other running backs to hit on?
Nope.
Cash wide receiver, what you got?
Oh man, so AJ Brown pops as our top dollars per point value at $7,200. I don't know if I can get there. Coming off the one catch game last week, the Titans offense just always worries me that they're going to throw it 22 times in this game. But that is a really nice price tag for AJ Brown, so he's definitely in play if you can stomach it. Davonte Adams, I feel like he's always underpriced on FanDuel. He's $8,400 this week. I'm going to go to Jalen Waddle here. Talked about him on DraftKings. I like him on FanDuel too at $6,700. He's third among all wide receivers and targets over the last 5 weeks. Will Fuller and Devontae Parker have missed the majority of those games, and they're out again Sunday. So I just think Waddle's a good target bet for the price tag, and the matchup is obviously great.
Jared, I went to college for 4 years, so I've stomached much worse things than AJ Brown in this matchup. $7,200 before last week against the Saints. I think you're letting recency bias creep in too much because he had 9+ targets in 4 straight games before that. So $1,200 cheaper than Davonte Adams, $1,300 short of Tyreek Hill, and even $400 shorter than Deebo Samuel. I'm going to have a pretty easy time playing AJ Brown this week. I think that it's possible to fit 2 of those guys, maybe even 3 of those guys into some lineups, considering all the cheap running backs that we have available. Deebo Samuel, I mentioned, is also significantly cheaper, by at least $600 below Davonte Adams and $700 short of Tyreek Hill. He had the big game last week on low volume, and maybe they throw the ball a little bit more this week because of Eli Mitchell being out, just to keep it from possibly getting into the hands of Trey Sermon.
Yeah, I haven't played Deebo once in DFS this season. He's just kind of like breaking my brain with how efficient he's been. I'm probably not going to play him again this week, so that's good for everyone else. So he'll keep posting big fantasy numbers.
He's the FOMO back right now. It's like you didn't play him to this point, and now he's so expensive. It's like, should I keep not playing him because now he's much more expensive than when I wasn't playing him before, or do I need to get in because this is just going to be a magical season the rest of the way?
I just know the first time I play him, it's going to be his dud. So I'm just not going to do it.
All right, good. Well, that's good to know. So that makes me consider him a little bit more strongly this week, and then I will avoid him next week when you jump on the train.
Perfect.
GPP wideout, what you got?
I have Rashad Bateman here. We talked about him on the DraftKings side. He's 5,800 on FanDuel. He already has 8 targets in 2 straight games. Those were his 3rd and 4th games as a pro. So he's come right in and stepped into a big role in this passing game. Marquis Brown's dealing with a thigh injury. He's questionable for Sunday. I think he's going to play, but we'll see, and he might not be at 100%. Devon Duvernay is listed as questionable. He was added to the injury report on Friday and was limited, so we'll see about him. But he played more snaps than Rashad Bateman did last Thursday night, which is stupid. I don't understand it, but if Duvernay's out, it's obviously going to help Rashad Bateman. So I thought he was a fine play even before these injuries popped up, and now he could be in for a much bigger role on Sunday.
Yeah, I think for his price, you can consider him in cash, but I definitely like him on the GPP side for those reasons that you mentioned. He's $1,900 cheaper than Marquis Brown, who, as you mentioned, is limited by injury, has topped 18.5% target share in each of his 4 games with the Ravens so far, and really has missed out on some close, deep chances. So he could have bigger numbers at this point than he does. So I like Bateman there as well. The other thing I want to mention, I talked about a Josh Allen lineup. I don't think I'm going to run back any Colts in that one if I am playing that Bills stacked lineup. I would rather use that savings. I would rather use the savings from Burrow lineup, meanwhile, to fit wide receivers besides Hunter Renfrow, who I mentioned on DraftKings that he was a better play over there because of his recent reception volume. At 6,100 here on FanDuel, he's okay. Especially coming off the 3 straight games of 7 catches. But Hunter Renfrow has been under 60 yards in each of those games, even on those 7 receptions. He's only reached 14.5 FanDuel points once all year. So I'm not saying Hunter Renfrow is going to kill you if you use him, especially in a Bengals lineup, but he just doesn't have the ultimate ceiling that other players will.
And Darren Waller's only a few $100 more expensive on FanDuel. So I do think he's the better run back for your Burrow teams.
Any more wideouts?
Nope.
Tight end for cash. What are you playing?
Not messing around here. Playing Travis Kelce, $7,300. He's easily our top dollars per point value at tight end. Interesting matchup note here too. Football Outsiders has Dallas number 1 in coverage against number 1 wide receivers and 24th in coverage against tight end. So I'm not saying Tyreek Hill is going to get shut down or he's not going to be a big part of the passing game, but it could tilt a bit in Kelsey's favor as far as who the focal point of Kansas City's passing game is on Sunday.
It'll be interesting to watch. One thing about Tyreek Hill is that they move him around at least as much as any other team does its top wideout, and probably more than most other teams do. So not too worried about matchups there. But yeah, if you're splitting hairs for things like that, I think if you do want to mess around and go to the other end at tight end, Cole Kmet or Adam Troutman are both in play in kind of similar range. Tremendous matchups for both. Cole Kmet's 5,100, Adam Troutman's 4,800. I find usually on FanDuel that $300 doesn't matter, but if it does, maybe it's a reason to favor Troutman. I would lean Kmet if that money doesn't matter. We have had good target counts for both. I've mentioned Kmet. We talked about him on Thursday. We talked about him on the DraftKings show. For Troutman, his targets have been 6, 7, and 6 the past 3 games. It's just an inefficient passing game, both from catch rate and yardage. He has yet to reach 50 yards in a game. So I feel better about betting on Cole Kmet, probably just because of how much I like Justin Fields. But both of those guys are pretty similar this week. Again, both in tremendous matchups. Both Baltimore and Philly have struggled in coverage on tight ends.
Yeah, Fields versus Trevor Siemian is a good tiebreaker in favor of Cole Kmet there. Man, I swear this is like the deepest pool of playable tight ends I can ever remember in DFS. Like there's a lot of guys I think are viable plays, especially in tournaments. You mentioned Dawson Knox as a Josh Allen stack. I like that a lot. Dalton Schultz, I think, is a good way to maybe get a lower owned piece of the Cowboys passing game coming off a dud last week, but he still ran around on 80% of the dropbacks. Now you have no Amari Cooper, so that should push more targets Dalton Schultz's way. And then Mike Gesicki coming off the goose egg on Thursday night, and he's only $400 less than Darren Waller on FanDuel, which feels gross to play Gesicki there. But our projections actually have Gesicki as a better dollars per point value than Darren Waller in this matchup against the Jets. So, at least Gesicki in your Tua lineups, and even in lineups without Tua, I think Gesicki's a nice tournament play. And
at least it's easier to bet on that rebound when the guy went 0 on 7 targets than TJ Hawkinson, who went 0 on 1 target. So it feels a little bit easier.
Yep.
I also want to throw out CJ Uzomah because it's CJ Uzomah week for me, apparently $5,200 in a GPP lineup, not on the cash side because he's a less good target bet than Adam Troutman and Cole Kmet, but he's in a better offense. He's got the Raiders, who are 29th in coverage DVOA against tight ends, according to Football Outsiders, 5th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position, according to Draft Sharks. Uzomah has 3+ catches in 4 straight games and 5 of his past 6 games. He's got 5 touchdowns in that 6-game span. So obviously, a touchdown reliant fantasy player, but he's scored from distance. We know he's got the speed. We know he's in a great spot that he can't be a coverage focal point. So there's upside to him, whether or not you're playing Joe Burrow.
Just make the title of this episode CJ Uzomah week.
That's right. That'll draw people in. On defense, Jared, what are you playing?
I mean, do we have to pay up for the Browns? What are they, $5,000 here? I still like going cheaper. I think Carolina for $4,100 is just there's a good defense at home against a pretty bad offense in Washington, so they make a lot of sense to me. And then I like the Eagles too at $3,900. The Saints missing Alvin Kamara. They're also missing both of their tackles. Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk are both out of this game. So I thought it was going to be an ugly game to begin with. That's obviously a big matchup upgrade for this Eagles defense.
Yes, and the Eagles are more capable, I think, than the Colts right now of exploiting that weakness. So I like the Eagles as well at $3,900. That's going to make it tougher to get up to the Browns because they are priced up on FanDuel as opposed to where they are on DraftKings. It doesn't totally take them out of contention because of that matchup that we talked about. They're 900 more than Carolina, which I think is in play at 4,100 as well. Washington's allowed 14 sacks over the past 3 games. Carolina's coming off a 4-sack game. But yeah, the 2 that I have highlighted are Philly for that low price and Cleveland for Tim Boyle week.
Yeah, if you can comfortably get up to the Browns, by all means, play them. But I wouldn't go, sacrificing at another position just to get up to the Browns.
Yeah, that's where I like to put in something like the Eagles when I'm setting the lineup. And then if I get to the end, I'm like, I got $1,100 that I don't need to spend anywhere else. I guess I can play the Browns.
That's perfect when you have, exactly $1,100 left and you can get the Browns in there.
Exactly. It's like when I'm at the grocery store and deciding whether I can afford beer. That's going to do it for this Week 11 FanDuel podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. Get player recommendations. Kevin English has your cash game picks. Corey Bushlin has your top GPP options. And then play with the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of the DS projections and FanShare ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and other formats, you can also join the free DraftSharks Discord. You can find the link to do that in the description for this podcast. For Jared Small and the rest of the DraftSharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.